Want to achieve network marketing success? Then you're in the right company. Hello, and welcome to Leave Nothing to Chance, hosted by networking marketing giant John Solleder. Learn everything you need to know about the network marketing space from somebody who's actually done it. Join us every week for front row seats as we feature some of the finest and most successful personalities in network marketing. Leave nothing to chance. Join us now.
Well, it is beyond a privilege, my friends, to introduce somebody who I've got great respect for. Many of you know him. You certainly know his company. You certainly know literally the work of art that he works with. But I want to tell you a little bit about Mr. Dave Blanchard as we get started here. And Dave, I'm going to read right from your resume if I can. So with an extraordinary background in sales, management, networking, commercial and residential real estate, television, and film, Dave is the consummate Renaissance man of business. He also was a middle linebacker in high school and a free safety at Ricks College. And Dave has never failed to hit the real issues head on and does so with extraordinary clarity and accuracy. So welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
Thank you. Privileged to be here. And we add to that, I've been married 47 years to my sweetheart.
Great.
From our 7 children and grandmother to 27. So
20. Wow, you got McCormick beat. I kid him every time he has a new grandchild. I kid him that. And by the way, we're talking about our friend Dan McCormick, mutual friend. So for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, but Dan had his 14th. So I'm like, well, you got enough for 2 rugby teams now and 2 basketball teams now, and a few more in football. But you got enough for. Wow, there's supposed to be some interesting Thanksgiving football games on the front lawn with all those grandkids.
Absolutely, there we go.
Right. So Dave, I asked you this off camera, but I have read this book 19 times in my life over a 30 some odd year period when I was first saw it back in the 1980s. And every time I read it, I get something that I missed. And I'd like to think I'm a smart guy. I'd like to think I'm a good reader. I use my highlighter. Is that everybody else's experience with the world's greatest salesman?
Just history-wise, Greatest Salesman, 1967, written, published in 68. And Og had written the beginning and the end. And this is the answer to your question. The 10 scrolls were not written. And he was struggling because he set himself up as a writer. This is supposed to be the wisdom of the ages, right? Mm-hmm. He took 3 days off of work. And the third night, he tucks the boys in bed, goes and lies down for a few moments, and all of a sudden it comes to him. Today, I begin a new life. Today, I shed my old skin, which had too long suffered the bruises of failure and the wounds of mediocrity. Today, I'm born anew, and my birthplace is a vineyard where there's fruit for all. I'm a writer. I know what he's going through. This is going through his head as he's racing to his typewriter, because back then it was an IBM Selectric, right? And he starts pounding. And at 9 o'clock the next morning, he walks into the bedroom and says to his wife, Betty, it's finished, collapses on the bed and sleeps for a day.
Wow.
It was a spontaneous download. That's important to know. This is a very precious book. Scientists would say written in the language of the intrinsic, which means it's got unlimited applications, unlimited interpretations, and it comes to you. You don't have to go to it. It comes to you wherever you are. And because of that unique characteristic, you may not have heard that line before the way you heard it today, because it's speaking to your today. I love studying the scrolls. It's been almost 3 decades. Because every time I get into a scroll, I have a similar experience. I'm ready to hear something differently. Was that in there before? I've got some of them almost memorized from experience and still have that experience. It's almost miraculous. Well, it is miraculous.
I would characterize it as almost a living book in the respect that to your point, it's almost like something comes to life and manifests itself at that moment that's going on in your life. or your career or your business or your marriage or your kids or your, whatever it is that is in need almost that day. That's what I always find. It fascinating. I've shared that with Dan and with so many other people, with your son and everyone else that knows this book inside and out. My oldest sister, who is a big fan of it as well. It's just an amazing work. So let me ask you this: the impact of this on Dave Blanchard's life.
It's like everything I did till now, and we started 22 years ago with this company. Everything till then was a preparation for this moment. I can't imagine, because it's influenced everything I share with my children. Everything I share, we spent the decade before this paying back $1 million in debt from the collapse of the real estate market in California. We just came out of that experience, was coming out of that experience, I should say, about 7 years in when I found the book. And I started studying it toward the end of that journey, which was very painful. And it was very hopeful. And all of a sudden, it's impacted my life. I wrote out the last $14,000 check in August of 2000 and put it in the mail. I mean, it was impossible. I almost took my life in 1993 to cash in on $1 million life insurance policy to solve that problem. I mean, it was traumatic. And all of a sudden, it's over. And Betty Mandino calls me and says, the rights to the greatest salesman in the world are not being renewed. I wanted to call you first because I'd written the feature film script for the Christ Commission, another one of Og's favorite books. And she said, I want to call you first. Would you be interested? I was standing in the cancellation line of the Lion King in New York in January. And I said, Betty, is this a rhetorical question? She said, do you have any idea what that book has done to me? I wrote about it in Today I Begin a New Life. I said, it's like an old shoe. When Og started speaking, I'm reading this. It's like, first thing I said is, we have the same teacher. I remember that. We have the same teacher. And it was like an old shoe that was just so comfortable to put on. It's like it always been part of my life, but now it became my life, my career. I told her, absolutely. We cut the deal standing in the line with my attorney in California, hers in New York, Bell Publishing in Florida. I came home, left the film business, and we started the Og Mandino Group.
Amazing.
That was 22 years ago. Wow.
And we're going to talk about some numbers, but boy, has that impacted so many people around the world. Let's talk about your book, though. Let's talk a little bit about Today I Begin a New Life, Intentional Creation. If there were 3 major lessons to be learned from that book, what would they be?
Well, I write about them. And sometimes they really get tested, because I remember in a really dark hour, I'm going, I didn't take my life. I got up the next morning, I'm angry. I long to cry to the God of my youth, but the God of my youth will not hear my cry. I must change my God or change my cry. It still rolls off my tongue. It was my cry that needed to change. My cry needed to change. One of the most important things that came out of writing that book, which came from doing several 100,000 assessments, we'll talk a little bit about that later, an assessment where we actually measure habits of thinking, not personality, but the habits of thinking that drive that. It became obvious that people who want to create more in their life, 93% of them have the gift to vividly visualize and effortlessly think. And as a result, they go into the future, and if they have any inclination to want life to be easier or less stressful, they use that gift destructively to fantasize. And boy, they get norepinephrine, which would be a controlled drug if it were a prescribed substance. And they just get euphoric, and then life shows up differently. And they go into this dark dungeon of despair and discouragement, then back into fantasy, back into catastrophe. And they hate their life. And as a result, they beat themselves up. What drove the book, lesson 1, which drove the book, was a 55-year-old man. First time I was doing his debrief of his assessment, he's in tears. David, I can almost touch it. I can almost taste it. Why can't I have it? And then he started to cry. What's wrong with me? Does God not love me? It was so clear. It wasn't about whether God loved him or not. He was using his gift of vivid visualization to escape instead of to create. So the very first lesson was, what is that thought process designed to do? How can we use it to create life? Get an inspired idea, take what is, move it forward a millimeter and celebrate, instead of keep holding life hostage to an expectation, that concrete condition for happiness. That would be one. Two, we can't just throw up on people with our ideas. We can't be transactional with human beings. Dr. Perry, in his latest book with Oprah, What Happened to You, diagrammed it for us. We go through our cortex, down through all of our crap, all our trauma triggers, all of our stress points, and then we go back up through the other person's to their cortex. What does it take to create a safe enough place to get through and navigate those landmines so that we can finally have a conversation? Intrinsic validation. Inspired idea. I just observed great listeners, and we broke it down into pieces that were understandable. Third, you can't create in your head. You can get a vision in your head that'll ignite your passion, but we create intangible reality. And creators are going to want to spend more time here in the creation than in their head thinking.
Interesting.
Those are the three most important things I learned during those 10 years, and that's why I wrote about them.
Isn't it amazing when we communicate what we think is for other people, we're really communicating it for us, right?
It was my journey. That was my journey during those 10 years. And then for the next 12 with the Og Mandino group, I started writing at 8 years in. It took 4 years to write it. But I was just, what I had learned was validated in the application with real human beings. And here's Og Scrolls supporting the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was like magic.
Amazing. So, Dave, you've coached 60,000 plus people, 4,000 individually, some very heavy duty people. I know you can't, talk about specific people, but I know I have an idea of some of the people, talking to yourself, talking to Paul, talking to Dan, and all of that. But once again, that fundamental question, because as we teach, we learn, right? What are the three things you've taken away in this long career, helping well over 60,000 people? That's just in coaching, right? Millions of people with the foundation. But what have you learned that you've taken away in your life, be it your personal life, be it your business life, from teaching all those folks?
I think the greatest thing is empathy. When you really step into another person's world and find out what's really happening to them. And if you've had challenges in your life, I wrote about, it's called the Chicago Dream. You're dragging this sack around, and you take those things out and you put them in your heart instead of dragging them around, so you can listen differently. It's like your character's been forged in the furnace of adversity. You know what pain feels like. Can you take it back? No, but you can choose to use this as an empathetic reference point to understand better what somebody else is going through. And if you'll do that, there'll finally be purpose in your suffering, joy in your journey, and much needed healing in your soul. And applying these principles to people's lives, the greatest thing is that we actually can become a better version of ourselves. We have the capacity to do that. We've got unhealthy habits of thinking. We've got stress points and trauma triggers that are getting in the way, but we can work through those pieces and become the very best version of ourselves. I've watched so many people just by simply listening better, using their mind more constructively to get inspired ideas and then acting on them in the now. Lives shift, success increases. It's possible. But self-improvement is at that level. It's literally in the moment, making a different decision. And everything we call self-improvement is just preparation for that moment. We do coaching, we do read books, we watch podcasts. Those are all helpful to prepare us for the moment, but self-improvement is in the moment when we make a different decision. And to watch people do that and create new habits of thinking, that is thrilling. Not everybody's ready to do that.
True.
But those who do, it's miraculous.
How does it make you feel when somebody you've coached, and maybe they weren't at the top of their game when it came to you? Because let's face it, most of the time somebody comes for coaching because they're not at the top of their game. They know that there's room for improvement in some area. And they come back and they say, Dave, you said this, and you might say, I don't even remember saying it, but you said this at this time, and I applied it, and it made these changes in my life. And thank you so much. How does that make you feel? Because that has had to have happened thousands of times over the years, I would imagine.
It's really simple. I always respond back. Thank you. This is what I live for.
Great answer. Yes. So let me ask you this. Habit Finder. Something I've used, something I'm a member of, something I've shared with my downline organization, with friends of mine in the network marketing space that I'm involved in. And for that matter, friends that are involved in, sales, and some people that are just, they're not involved in anything, but they need Habit Finder. Talk about that and the science of it, the application of it, how they can use it, anything you want to share on Habit Finder, because it's a gift that you have given to the world that they need to know about.
Thank you. I'm kind of a bottom line guy. Og talks about shifting habits. I said, there's got to be a way to measure what we're working on. And we found the science of the University of Tennessee, formal science of axiological mathematics. Crazy cool mathematics. I've had some nothing short of spiritual experiences with the mathematics, some dreams, et cetera, to figure out how to do things differently than they've ever been done before. And it must be working. They asked me to be the opening keynote at the Hartman Convention conference last year with all their PhDs. It was awesome. This is what we're doing with it. We spent $2 million and 250,000 people going through it to get here. But imagine this. We measure personality. Joe Dispenza calls that memorized emotions. And we're trying to shift personality, or more harmfully, we try to manage it. Well, that's just how they are. So we start managing personalities. I'm a D. I'm a this on the Strength Finder. I'm a this on the Enneagram. Now, those are great inductive assessments for measuring what they measure. But my question is, do you want to manage behavior that might be inappropriate? Or would you like to help that person become the best version of themselves and then manage that? It's a different science. It's called deductive science. It's mathematics. It's Cantor's transfinite calculus. It takes us back to the headwaters and measures the very habits of thinking that drive our emotions. Emotions, when memorized, our personality, then our behavior, our actions. We want to shift any of that. Let's go back to the source. Again, there are really powerful places for personality tests. I had a company recently do a whole bunch of those to find out they'd lost everybody with a certain personality, and that's why the company was struggling. That's important to know. But if a person wants to improve, I don't want them saying, well, what did you expect? I'm a red. You know what I mean? Let's get to the bottom of what's really happening and ask yourself, am I maximizing that natural gift? And would it serve me if I shifted that unhealthy habit? And then providing them with the tools to actually make that happen. But the Habit Finder measures it with scary dead accuracy. We hear that all the time. How do you know that? Because it's so simple to take. I will give you a little spoiler alert. Can you imagine going into a metaverse, and meeting your habits of thinking, acting the way they're currently thinking, in a gamified environment where you work on shifting them, and then you come out into the world to practice what you've learned?
Big changes happen.
So much more to that than I'm sharing, but how exciting to be able to be in a virtual reality working on a habit of thinking. I think we could speed up the shift.
Wow. And they can just get that habit finder.
We give it away for free. John, the reason why we do is almost everybody's in the personality world. They understand that place. They've taken some of the best ones, like the Enneagram and a Strength Finder and the DISC, Myers-Briggs. Those are all powerful inductive assessments for trying to deduce a diagnosis through a series of questions. Hardly anybody's been in this space. They're not even aware of their own habits of thinking. It's a weird place to go by yourself. So we give it to you. And we say, spend 20 minutes with one of our habit finder specialists for free to spend some time in that space to see if it's resonating with you. Are you really ready to make those shifts? Because if you are, here's an introductory way to do it. Here's another way to do it, all the way through to personal coaching with a trained habit finder coach to really intently work on it. But let's find out if it's even of interest. So we give it away. There's no fee for it.
Exactly. And it's such a gift. I took it the first time probably 3 or 4 years ago. And then Dan reminded me just in a conversation one day, and I said, I'm going to take it again. And you're absolutely right. It once again, it kind of like reads your mail, so to speak. It's like, oh yeah. I'm really in a lot of ways. So you know what? I'm not going to give it away either. Folks, go take it. Go take it.
You don't know what we're asking for, so it can't be manipulated.
Exactly.
I love what Paul said one day, spontaneous. He says, it makes your brain play its cards, unconscious cards, makes it play the cards. It just plays them. You go, man, how does it know that? I don't talk about that. Yeah, well, there it is.
Yeah. Well, and our habits, our habits create everything that's going to happen, good, bad, or indifferent, right? So
Headwaters, yep.
Incredible, valuable tool. So next question. And I could ask you questions all day, but let me ask you this. I've never shifted off of my favorite scroll. Okay, in my case, it's number 3. Okay, I've never shifted off of. I will persist until I succeed. Because when I first read this book, I was in a place where I wasn't succeeding, frankly. But the old athlete in me, like yourself, right? The old competitor, the guy that gets his juices up and says, well, this won't defeat me. I'll overcome it. I'll figure it out. I'll go a different angle. I'll work harder. If I got to work 18 hours a day and I'm only working 17, well, I'll get up an hour earlier. That's how I'm wired. So that one always hit me, and I've never changed it. What's your favorite and why? And have you, over the years in developing the company and dealing with thousands of people and raising your family and your grandkids, have you shifted, or is it the same one? And if what's the favorite? Okay, great.
Let me talk about that one for a moment. It's so powerful. I'll persist until I succeed. Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels wrote a book called Tools. In that book, they said, we all seem to believe that somehow, some way, we're going to be exonerated eventually from needing to struggle. Og made it really clear that we learn how to struggle well. That's it's a journey. And he says, where dry desert ends, green grass grows. And he could say, and then there's more dry desert and green grass, and more dry desert and green grass. We learn to persist no matter how we're feeling. We just keep our eye on the goal above our head and ignore the obstacles at our feet and keep persisting. It's a powerful, powerful piece. My very favorite scroll is scroll 9. I will act now. I hunger for success. I thirst for happiness and peace of mind. Lest I act, I will perish in a life of failure, misery, and sleepless nights. I will command, and I will obey my own command. That is an incredible sentence for 1967, because now we understand the ability to be metacognitive, to step back and reflect on our own thinking. I will command, and my habits of thinking will obey my command. It's one of the greatest gifts, metacognition. We didn't even get into this space until the 90s. And here's Og teaching us, I will act now. There are so many quotable quotes in that scroll. We could go on for a half hour just quoting the quotes in there and talking about them. But what a great scroll. I will act now. Because if you actually read it like 3 times a day for, say, 3 weeks, you'll actually hear it talking to you. You'll go to procrastinate something, it'll say, act now. I don't want to do it right. Act now. And you finally do it and you feel better. Here's the secret. The voice saying act now is your balanced measurement in your habit finder assessment. The voice that's saying I don't want to is an unhealthy habit of thinking. But we're so identified with it, we've often listened to it. That scroll will talk to you.
You know, let me give you back something on this. I mentioned to you earlier that I had interviewed Ben Gay the third last year. And of course, as you well know, and just for any of our audience that didn't listen to the podcast, they can still listen to it on Leaving Nothing to Chance. But I said to Ben at the end of that interview, I said, 2 years, you're eating lunch with Dr. Napoleon Hill every day. Can you wrap up 3 things? 2 years of conversation, right? Of everything from the weather to the Super Bowl to, things that don't really matter versus the things that you and I know really matter. But, you can't always be in the middle of heavy stuff, right? There's a lot of light stuff around the heavy. So I said 3 things. And to that same point about I will act now, scroll 9, he said integrity, three things to takeaways, right? Integrity, super important. Focus, super important. But most importantly, action. Same thing. So whether it was Mr. Mandino, Dr. Hill, same thing, right? We got to get busy. We got to do something, right? We just can't know something. We got to take action and do something. And boy, I love it. So let me ask you this. That's your favorite today. And you said that's changed from time to time. I mean, what would have been, I don't know, 10 years ago?
To stay with love in my heart. And when people read that, we get to learn how to use our life experiences. I love the rain for it cleanses my soul. I love the sun for it warms my bones. I love the light for it shows me the way. I love the darkness for it shows me the stars. Incredible paragraph that tells us, because he says, and how will I do this? How will I love these people? How will I melt hearts? And Og makes it really clear. You'll use your own personal life experiences as empathetic reference points to do it. That's how you're going to do it. You can miss that. Scroll 2, when he wrote him all that one night, Betty made him amend scroll 2. Only when she had him amend. He mended that one because it was too complicated for 1967. I'll greet this day with agape love, a heightened level of awareness, not warm and fuzzy, awareness. At the end of that scroll, and most of all, I'll love myself, for when I do, I zealously guard what I take into my mind, my heart, my body, and my soul. Crazy cool scroll. So I fall in love with that one. Scroll 4, Nature's Greatest Miracle. We could keep going. I'll live this day as if it is my last, because, at midnight tonight, April 20th is dead. What do I do with it? We could keep going. It just depends on where I am in my own journey, which one's speaking to me right now.
Now, Dave, I have to tell you, I've got a wall of fame here on my computer of some of the people that I've interviewed. And this one here, that hopefully people can't see with these backdrops, but anyway, it's got the word equanimity on it. And I asked your son, I said, Paul, give me of, all of this great stuff that you've been around and introduced to and all the great people you've worked with and everything else. Give me that one word. What's his dad's one word and why? If there was one word somebody could lock into, and in my case, it's the word tranquility. For some reason, I heard Dr. Norman Vincent Peale many, many years ago when I was at a really dark time in my life. So I was 17 at the time, and I heard that word. And where I had a physical problem. I had a double spinal cord surgery. I was in the hospital, and wasn't sure I was ever going to walk again. And I read his book that my dad gave me. And I heard that word tranquility for the first time. And it was like, wow, it gave me this tremendous peace. Equanimity, I know for Paul. What would Dave's word be?
By the way, that's an interesting word. That's what the last book I wrote was Equanimity, Conquering Mount Entrepreneur. Equanimity is tranquility. Equanimity is peace. It's actually literally defined peace of mind, but it's a different kind of peace of mind than the world tries to sell. It's not ease and less stress. It's from fully maximizing your gifts and bringing them to the lives of other people, making every minute count in the day. And at the end of that day, you know you left a footprint on that planet. It mattered that you were here. And there is a sense of overwhelming tranquility, peace of mind that just transcends all understanding. I got a good friend who said that once. Peace that transcends all understanding. That is equanimity. That's a great word. Another word I love is inspire. It means to breathe life into people. Expire, take life from them, right? But inspire, not to motivate, because motivate, we push, we stop pushing, they stop moving. Inspires to light the flame inside of them. That's inspire. That's actually my favorite word.
Great. Well, you're on my Hall of Fame now. Which means that I'll be quoting you to somebody and say, hey, Dave Blanchard's word was inspire. Trust and inspire.
Stephen M. Covey just came out with this book. This is a pre-cover that he sent to me. It won't be released for a little while. Trust and inspire. He's using the word. It's awesome.
Wow. Wow. There you go.
How truly great leaders unleash greatness in others through trust and inspire. That's awesome.
So let's ask this. Let's talk about some of your other books that you've written. And then let's talk about some people that books you read when your go-to place, like we all have. And but let's start with yours. Let's talk about some of your other titles, where they can get them.
Okay.
Okay.
They're all on Amazon, and I've narrated all of them. Took a few years to do that, but I finally took my own advice and set a date in the sand and just got it done. Today, I begin a new life. So timely for today, because some people are just reaching that limit. What do I do now? And I very transparently take them through my journey. Not so it's about me, it's so they can get honest about their journey. And then we go through the three major things to assist: connecting with people, using your mind constructively, being present in the now. Here's what you can do to get back on track. The second book is called The Observer's Chair. That's the metacognition, stepping back and observing your own habits of thinking. It's all on the topic of self-esteem, because a lot of people are struggling in this area, questioning their worth and worthiness, their ability, their character, the value of their contribution, the value of their ideas, past mistakes they've made. They're just burdened. And when we're burdened, we're not available. We talk ourselves out of our own inspiration. We need to be in love with ourselves, not in the sense of making it about us, is so we don't have to make it about us. We're so okay. We can be totally available to serve others. So that's the Observer's Chair. It walks through how to break some of those patterns. Then Equanimity, I wrote because I've joked around for years that some people say they want to climb the mountain, but they spend the whole time in the parking lot fantasizing about being there. And so this is a journey where the reader is pulling into the parking lot. The reader has an encounter with people parked in the parking lot. The reader gets out and gets on the path and has an experience with mentors who walk them up the mountain to the peak. It's kind of a unique way of writing a book, but it's not about a character. The reader becomes the character in the journey. That's how to get onto the path to conquer Mount Entrepreneur. What are the decisions you want to make before you start the journey? What are the critical parts in the journey? So that's a fun book. I've got a couple more in me, John. I can feel them boiling up, and that's just what happens. You can't stop them. They just start coming out.
Yeah.
And you just dedicate the time and start writing.
Every time I interview someone who's authored many books, because I've authored a couple. I've got my own books that I got to advertise. My wife says I have to. I got to figure out a way to pay for these shows one of these days. Moving Up 2020, which I wrote in 2019, having no idea what would happen in 2020, because we all know what happened in 2020, right? The world kind of shifted, right? And then I wrote this one last year, Leaving Nothing to Chance, which is why the show's called what it is. And I reference them. Not only folks, you can get them on Amazon as well. And they're specifically really on network marketing, and I've got a lot of stories in there. But I've done it 4 times, but one was a remake. I took parts out, added parts in, and then the Leaving Nothing to Chance, that was a totally different category. And I know how many hours it takes. And I know that process, right? Where you go to sleep and you say goodnight to the wife and the kids, and that's it. You put the dogs out, bring them back in, and you go, okay, that's it, I'm going to sleep. And then, 2:00 in the morning, you go, oh, what if, you know exactly what I'm talking about. What if I said this? Or what if I changed that I wrote at 5:00 in the afternoon? And then, of course, you write on airplanes, and you write on the weekend, and you write when you get a chance, right? Which but you've done this repeatedly with so many great titles through the years. I mean, how have you found the time to raise a family, manage a very large business, deal with coaching well over 60,000 other human beings, right? How have you done what you've done? Because it's fascinating.
It's a great question. And it has to be answered, I think, this way. You get in the morning and you reflect, and you get revelatory ideas that ignite your passion, and you're driven by passion. So you don't count the cost or track the time. Today I Begin a New Life was written between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. for 4 years.
Mm.
There was a rewrite done the last week that was done I would coach all day, write almost all night, get a shower, sleep for an hour. And it was from Sunday night till Friday at 1:22 p.m. to finish the rewrite, because I needed 100 pages taken out, and I took out 100 and added 3 chapters. It was an incredible download. And John, while you were speaking about your experience, I know you've had this. It was 2:30 in the morning. You're so tired, you're just in tears. And it's like, what am I doing? Then all of a sudden, it's like the heavens open, and there's a download of information.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends up in the book verbatim without a word changed. I think writers live for those moments.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really precious. Then
And those are the times, in my experience, those are the times when I look up at God, I say, really, at 2:30 in the morning, you couldn't have given this to me at 4:30 in the afternoon. and only for the people, and we have a lot of authors that watch the show, by the way. So you guys know what I'm saying. If you've never written, no, I would encourage everybody everybody's got at least one book in them, because every life is a unique story. Even if you write it for your kids and your grandkids, and you just self-publish it and you give it to them as a gift, But I've had those moments where I'm going like, okay, couldn't you give this to me earlier, but or wait till the morning. But you're absolutely right. There is something about that, and I think it's, as you get into the mind science, which you understand a great deal more than I do, but I read a lot about the human brain and its capacity and how we unuse so much more of it than we use consciously. I think it's that's there's something going on there that we don't understand that's working while we think we're being passive, be it that we're sleeping or we're engaging in activity. Otherwise, that something else is working there. It says, hey, kind of knocks on you at that time of the day and says, I got something for you. Is my take on it.
So that you're available at 2:30 in the morning to get it.
Yeah.
That's the price you pay.
Exactly. So let's say this. Let's say that this afternoon you get home from the office, and there's a knock on the door, and they say, Dave, you and Mrs. Blanchard pack up a bag, but it's got to be very limited, okay? Because we're going to take you to a beautiful island, plenty of food, plenty of water, plenty of sustenance, okay, for a little vacation. However, you're limited on what you can bring, Okay, so you bring your clothes and your stuff that you need, but we're only going to allow you, besides your holy Bible, okay, to bring 3 other books with you of other authors. They can't be yours. Now, I'm going to guess if I was in your library, there's probably 10, 20, 30,000 books of all sorts of people. And I'm probably not understating that. How do you pick 3, and which 3 are they?
I'd probably pick the 3 that I go to often. One of them I need to buy a new copy because there's so many notes in the margins that it's Social Intelligence by Dan Goleman.
Mm.
It's a little technical, but it is a brilliant, brilliant book. He also wrote Primal Leadership, which is also a really great book. I love the tools. I mentioned that earlier. These are 2 atheists who help their patients get into action. And they have a technique for getting people into action. They said it's just miraculous. When they get into action, it's like they're in alignment with the force that orders the planets. So I love that book. Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss. It's the weaponized version of intrinsic validation, connecting with people. He applied it to an FBI profiler brilliantly. He teaches us so many lessons in that book. I could keep going, but I don't know which 3 I'd pick. That would be really interesting. But certainly the scriptures would come, and probably the latest book I'm reading, Stephen and Mark Covey's book. Just getting into it and go, man, this is cool. Bruce Perry's book with Oprah Winfrey, What Happened to You? That's been one of the most therapeutic books I've ever read personally.
Really?
I mean, here's a therapist who's saying, right now the question is, what's wrong with you? Well, I'm suffering from anxiety. Scale of 1 to 10, 6. Okay, here's your medication. And he's going, well, what trauma trigger, what stress response is creating the anxiety? Let's resolve that. It's brilliant. And he does it in a way that a person who's watching this, who's got any stress responses and trauma triggers, which I have a lot from my youth, to listen and process. It's just been so beautiful. Great experience. I've listened to it. Now I'm reading it because there are so many things I want to have underlined and marked so I can come back to them. Sometimes it's the latest one, but I'll give you my formula. I open a book and I read the first chapter, and I always ask the same question. Do they have the same teacher? That doesn't mean 2 of my favorites were written by atheists. I mean, they don't believe the same thing I believe, but they had the same teacher. That's just, and if they do, man, I just consume it. If they don't, no matter how clever it is or popular it is, I just don't read it. I don't want it.
That thought process right there is so profound. It should be a college course taught at every college in the world. Do they have the same teacher? I wrote that down. I need more sticky notes. I wrote on a piece of paper here, but Dave, that is so profound when you think about that. Like we said a few minutes ago about Mandino and Hill. I don't even know if those 2 gentlemen knew each other or knew each other existed at that time, because obviously social media wasn't what it is today, right? They were probably aware of each other, I imagine. Who knows? They may have known each other, but to that point, did they have the same teacher? Wow.
Well, he had a hard time promoting The Greatest Salesman. He would say, I was there. I just took dictation.
Really?
That's an inspired book.
Yeah, to say the least.
He couldn't sell himself. I just took dictation. What a great comment.
I shared this with Paul, and I've shared it with Dan in the past also. And I'd love your thoughts on this. I come from a family that has had some people who are members of an anonymous society that helps people stop drinking.
Hmm.
And of course, we know Og's background, right, with that situation. And one of my family members doesn't mind me saying it. I've got her permission. I've asked her in the past. So it's my oldest sister. And when I first was interviewed on Dan's show about a year and a half ago, I mentioned it to her. She said, "Do you know how many of us in the program have read that book?" And now I'm thinking of it from my filter, my little lens here, my universe, network marketing, direct sales, inspire people, read the book, get the meat from the book, apply it in your business, apply it in your life, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a whole nother bunch of people that have been so influenced so positively by this work of this one man, that he probably, at the time he wrote it, he probably didn't ever foresee that. But here we are 50 years later or so, and how many people he's helped once again during their troubles, which are not like, gee, a distributor didn't show up for a meeting tonight, I'm depressed, I'm mad, my check went down, I'm mad, the economy got bad, less people are buying product, I'm mad, versus, gee, maybe I'm standing at that bridge and considering throwing my life away, or my family away, or whatever. Really the real critical life decisions that book has impacted so many people. I would just love any comments or thoughts that you have on the use of that book by people that are at that dark place, perhaps.
First of all, it's no accident that it resonates with Alcoholics Anonymous and its members. Og was an alcoholic. In the original copies of the book, hard copies, there's a story. It's about 12 pages long. He tells his story of losing his wife and his daughter to his alcoholism, and staying in a cheap hotel, going for a walk, seeing a gun in a pawn shop. And he had enough money in his wallet to buy it. But then he had the impression to go to the library instead, start reading books, changed his whole life. But when he wrote that from, listen to that, the blows that were struck, the pain that was caused. Can I take that back? He was estranged from his daughter for his lifetime. He never was allowed to see her. Interestingly enough, when she got cancer later in her life, Betty, Og's widow, took care of her until she died.
Wow.
But he never got to see her. So when you read some of those lines and knowing it's no mistake that someone's in a very dark hour really relates to what he's saying, because he knows what that dark hour feels like. So it speaks to the person in a dark hour.
Yeah, it certainly does. And it's been such a gift to so many people. And including to yourself and myself and our families and our businesses and the people that we're around. But like I said, when we read with our own filter all the time. What am I getting out of this that I can apply for my life, my business, etc.? Not necessarily thinking that there's somebody else who might not be thinking in those terms, but thinking in the terms like he was. Hey, there's a gun. Hey, maybe I end whatever pain I'm in. Right? Short-term answer to a long-term problem, perhaps, right? And the impact of this book on the world. And the impact, by the way, and I don't want to lose sight of this, folks who are listening, the impact that Dave Blanchard and his family have had by taking this book and getting it out geometrically, not only in a direct selling world, we're just one little facet of humanity, right? But in all of these worlds where people are able to gain from this wonderful book. So I want to thank you for that, Dave, on behalf of all of our listeners, because I don't know where they're all at. I had one lady on the show last year who was driving down a highway in Nebraska, and some things had happened in her life. Her daughter had been murdered a few months before, and she was in a very dark place in her life, and there were two semis on the side. And she said, you know what, I'm just going to drive between them and let them finish me. And she looked in her rearview mirror, and she saw a family in another SUV behind her, right? You know, mom and dad and some kids, and said, well, if I do that, I'm going to kill them too. And she made the good choice not to, obviously. And now she's building a business and putting her life back together, right? So we don't know where somebody's at when they get this book in their hands. So I want to thank you for that. So Dave, in closing, any last thoughts? Hey, most importantly, how do they get some more information about the foundation and anything else that they want to partake of? Before I forget. Oh, I do have one other question after that. I'm forgetting the one behind you there. I got to ask a fun one, but
okay. Habitfinder.com, really simple. Habit Finder, Finder, habitfinder.com. Take your habit finder, ask for a free consult, and let us serve you. If that's all you need, great. Guide you to a book, get a book. There's a lot more that's there available. We've got programs that are so inexpensive that help go into deep situations for people. We just want to help people get to the next level. We obviously are running a successful company doing it, but our mission is always leaving value. That's just do habitfinder.com. The books, Today I Begin a New Life, The Observer's Chair, Equanimity, Conquering Mount Entrepreneur, they're all on Amazon. And the audio's there. And if you want to hang out with me for a few hours, buy the audio and we'll just hang out going through the book together. So that's kind of fun.
So last fun question. Okay. Not that they all haven't been fun, but the fun one is I'm a big fan of that guy's jersey hanging behind you. And tell us about that.
Well, that was a gift. There's, I think, about 22 of those. I had the privilege of speaking at the SMU football team years ago. June Jones was the coach at the time, and Lee Steinberg came. And Lee Steinberg is Jerry Maguire. I mean, that's put it together. He wrote the book, The Number One Agent. He was there, and I said, Lee, what are you doing here? Because I had just done his habit finder 3 months before, referred from somebody. And it was just a great day meeting with June after, and a very public bankruptcy and alcohol charges. And he was just finishing up his rehab at the time. And I was sitting on the back porch with June, and I just got this strong impression, Dave, you're supposed to help Lee start his practice. I think, me? You know, so I met with his attorney. I wrecked my car coming out of the garage. I was so frustrated that he was dealing with this character. Got him a new attorney who's now the Attorney General of the state of Utah, John Reyes. And together we put together a team of great people, got it funded, got him organized, got him back in practice. Great human being. And Patrick is one of his first really big clients. And
he's amazing.
Investor came in and bought everybody out, and it's like one request: can we have one of these? So those were made up for all of us. So wow. Treasured, yeah, lots of memories looking at that.
Yeah, it's great. He's quite a young man. I know some people here in Dallas that are related to him, and he's a fine young man. He's going to do some great things in his life. He's done some great things in his life, but he's going to do a lot more, you know? So, well, Dave, this has been a privilege. I appreciate the time so much. I know how busy you are, and I just want to really just thank you. This has been wonderful. I learned a lot, most importantly, as I always do. I learned so much during this process of interviewing great people, and this has really been a privilege today. So thank you so much.
Privilege for me too, John. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Leave Nothing to Chance. If you want to know more about what it takes to succeed in the network marketing space, join us again next week for another amazing episode. For additional resources and to connect with John Solleder, visit leavingnothingtochance.com. Don't forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time.